Hello everyone. For the next 4 lectures, we are going to focus on the topic of plotting. Plotting is a really important topic because plots convince people in order to believe your arguments about your analysis. I hope that someday some of you might decide to go to graduate school in order to pursue your own area of research interest. Whenever you want to publish a research idea, you will always have to generate meaningful plots in order to convince peer reviewers about the credibility of your research idea. Let me show you how you can look at my list of publications. If you go to the course website and get rid of the part of the URL that comes after the domain name, you can go to my home page. In my web page, I have a publication tab which lists links to all of the publications. Let me show you example plots from one of my publications. During the next 4 lectures, we are going to be learning about how to produce some of these plots. The coolest thing about plotting is that once you learn specific aspects about a few examples of plots, it's going to be very easy for you to self teach yourself a new type of plot and to produce that plot for your data set. Let me talk about what module we are going to be using for the purpose of plotting. The most commonly used plotting module when it comes to Python is called as matplotlib. We are not going to directly use matplotlib. Instead, we are going to be leveraging the fact that pandas integrates with matplotlib. We'll be using pandas series and data frame in order to produce a lot of examples for plotting. Let's talk about the reading for today's lecture. Today's lecture has a custom reading which is mainly written by Tyler. Let me show you the notebook version of it. You have two versions for it, the HTML version and the notebook version. I would recommend you to go through the notebook version, which is matplotlib-intro.ipynb. We are going to go through some examples as part of this reading in today's lecture. Do make sure to go through the rest of the reading. Let's talk about today's lecture, and I'm going to get rid of all of these additional tabs before doing that. Go to the code link from today's lecture and download the template notebook file. Also download bus.db because we are going to be producing plots based on the table data within bus database. You don't have to download the trees.txt file. Just know that we are going to copy paste data from inside this file later on as part of today's lecture. I've already downloaded the template notebook file and set up the notebook file over here. Let me talk about what sort of plot functions we are going to be learning as part of today's lecture. We are going to be learning 3 different kinds of plots today, which are pie, bar, and scatter plot. Matplotlib is very similar to matplot or MATLAB. Both of those languages enable us to produce a lot of cool plots. A lot of features in Matplotlib has been borrowed from MATLAB or Matplot. As I mentioned before, Matplotlib integrates with pandas just like SQLite 3 integrates with pandas. We are going to be using pandas series and data frame in order to produce a lot of plots. The syntax for that is series.plot.plot function, and you also mention a list of arguments. A syntax for data frame is dataframe.plot.plot function followed by a list of arguments. Examples of plot functions would be pie, scatter, bar, line, and so on. Let me go ahead and import pandas. I'm going to say import pandas as PD, and I'm also going to say from pandas import series comma data frame so that I can keep using it. I'm going to be using the OS module later on. Let me also import SQLite 3 because we will be using bus.db. Let's go ahead and do a quick recap about pandas series. Recall that pandas series is sort of like a hybrid between Python lists and dictionaries, which means that every item in your series has both an index and an integer position. Index in pandas world is equivalent to key in Python dictionary world, and integer position in pandas is equivalent to index in Python list. Recall that you can create a series just by defining a list of items by simply saying series of a list. I can directly use series because I use the from style of import over here. Let's define a list of large numbers. Let's say the first item is 5 million and the next item is 3 million and the final item is 2 million. Let me go ahead and capture the series into a variable called s, and I'm going to go ahead and display s. Let's talk about the first example of plot, which is pie plot. Pie plot gives you a sense of ratio. Let me first show you an example with this particular series. The syntax for that would be series object, which is s dot plot dot pie, and you don't have to mention any arguments. So let's go through one more syntax over here about matplotlib. It's not really directly applicable to your current Python version because the very first plot does get displayed when you try to use the current version of Python and the current version of Jupyter. Just be aware of the fact that prior versions of Python used to have this problem where Jupyter Notebook doesn't display the first plot unless you explicitly mention matplotlib in line. I'm just going to leave this as a note here so that if you encounter this particular Python syntax when you Google something about producing a plot or something about certain aspects of a plot, just be aware of the fact that this particular statement needed to be included as part of your Jupyter Notebook file for previous versions of Python. Let's talk about what is wrong with the above plot. Well, the labels are all wrong. What exactly is 0, 1 and 2? Can you think of where this 0, 1 and 2 is coming from? Let me show you the output of the series S over here. Go ahead and pause the lecture video and write a comment in the comment section stating where do you think the values 0, 1 and 2 are coming from with respect to the series. If you were thinking that those are coming from the series index values, then you had the correct answer to my question. That's a weird thing about this plot, right? Why do we care about the series index over here? Since we are using a list in order to generate our series, both our index and integer position are going to be the exact same value, and all of those are just going to be numbers of 0, 1 and 2. It's not really giving us useful information about any of the parts of the plots that we are representing using those pies. As I mentioned before, PyPlot enables us to get a sense of ratio. So if you look at the blue part over here, you can say that clearly that part of our data set occupies the major portion within the entire pie, and green occupies the smallest percentage. The next thing which is wrong about this plot is we can't really see actual numbers, correct? We had certain numbers included as part of our series here. The plot doesn't give information about absolute numbers. You also have this weird none over here. The font is really tiny and no indication of what exactly we are plotting over here because there is no title for the plot. We are not going to fix all of this directly in the next version of the PyPlot. Let's just take this one part where you have the index values of 0, 1, and 2 showing up as labels, and let's just fix that. The fix for that particular aspect of this plot is very easy, correct? Instead of using a list of values, we could just use a dictionary of values. So let me convert this list into a dictionary. I'm going to add string keys for each of those values. Let's say that these are all annual spending of a particular department. The first one is for police, and the next one is for fire, and the final one is for schools. Let's go ahead and repeat the plot over here. I'm going to say s dot plot dot. Actually, give me just a second. Let me first go ahead and display the series. Now I'm going to say s dot plot of pi. That's slightly better, right? At least we know what labels go with each of these data values. It's often the case that a bar plot would be so much more valuable than a pie chart. You can see absolute plot numbers when it comes to bar plot. So what we are going to do now is we are going to take the rest of the list of problems with this particular plot, and we are going to fix that using bar plots instead of using pie chart. Using bar plot is very similar, so you can say series object dot plot dot bar. That will just show you the bar plots. That's so much better than before, right? Because you can see absolute numbers for each of your data points over here. Let's try and address a few issues which we have with this particular bar plot. The first thing is that how can we set axis labels and title? So the x-axis label is not really needed here because you have the description of each of those agencies, but the y-axis needs to be tagged with a specific label, and you also need to add a title to this particular plot, correct? Let me show you how you can do that. So let me first show you what you get when you call the plot function. So when you call s.plot.bar, let me show you the type of the return value. What you get is something which is called as axis subplot. In order to add additional details to the plot, we need to capture this axis subplot into a variable. So I'm going to go ahead and capture the return value into a variable called AX. That's the most commonly used variable in order to capture axis subplot. The way that you can set y label is simply by saying ax.set underscore y label. And let me set that as dollars over here. Let's set title by saying ax.set underscore title, and I'm going to say annual city spending for the title for each of those agencies. Slightly better plot. You're getting y-axis, and x-axis is pretty obvious from the information which you already have, and then you have a title for your plot. What is this weird 1 e power 6 thing? Recall that we created our initial data points in the order of million. Million is 10 power 6. That's why you're seeing this 1 e power 6. That's just representing the fact that you have 5 million, 3 million, and 2 million as your data points. How can we make the y-axis value more readable? Recall that in pandas series and data frame, you can very easily apply element-wise operation by simply applying an operator, which can be any mathematical operator like divide. Let's say that we are going to divide all of the individual items in the series by a million. So you're going to now get a much smaller number when you do that. It's very easy for you to use this converted data frame where you applied the element wise operation for the plotting. So you just need to use parentheses around the pandas expression over here, and then you can say dot plot dot bar, and I'm going to just repeat these two other lines which we had in the previous version of the plot. I'm going to capture the return value for axis subplot. Right, that's much more readable, right? The only problem now is your y-axis label is no longer correct. Let's fix that. So you need to say dollars in millions, which makes the plot slightly more readable with respect to the y-axis value over here. The next problem here is the x-axis labels are very difficult to read, correct? That's because those are vertical. You need to sort of like tilt your head to the left in order to be able to read it clearly. Let me show you how you can rotate the labels. First thing you need to do is get access to all of these labels. Recall that whenever you have your series, you can access your series index values directly by using the series object. So you can simply say s dot index, and that will give you all of the index values for that particular series. How can we use this to make our plot better? So first of all, we need to extract the list of values inside s dot index. So I need to say list of s dot index. Once I have the list of values, I can use the function which is called as set underscore x tick labels in order to set details about the x-axis tick labels. So the tick refers to these tiny black points on your x-axis or on your y-axis. Since we are saying set underscore x tick labels, we are talking about the x-axis tick labels. So that just refers to the fact that, okay, what values do you have here? You can obviously change the actual values itself, but that's not what we want here. We just want to rotate those, correct? So I can do that by saying rotation equal to some value. So rotation equal to 45 is going to angle them at 45 degree. You can play around with the rotation value to figure out what each of those values will do to the x tick labels over here. Right, let's move on to the next question over here. How can we change the font size inside the figure? So far, you would have had to sort of squeeze your eyes to read some of these, correct? That's because some of the prints inside the plot are really small with respect to font size. In order to be able to fix font size, you need to first of all import matplotlib. Let me show you how you can do that. You need to go all the way to the top of our notebook here because we want to have all of our imports at the top. I'm going to say import matplotlib, and I'm also going to show you how you can access the list of settings for various plots. You'll have to say matplotlib.rc params. Let me show you what that displays to you. RC params is a separate type of object by itself, but for the purpose of this particular class, you only need to know that it works like a dictionary. So you should be able to set any of the aspects of plotting by finding the corresponding name over here. So I can tell you that for the purpose of font size, you'll have to access matplotlib.rc params of font.size. Let me first show you what is the default value for font.size. That is 10.0. That's really tiny. So I'm going to change that to 18 instead. So I'm going to go back to the previous place where we were trying to answer this question, and let me try to show you how this parameter setting has an effect on the plot. The plot is so much more readable now than before, correct? So whenever you make changes to RC params, if you want those changes to reflect for the plots that you've already produced, you need to go and rerun all of those cells. I'm not going to do that so that you can follow along the flow here. All right, I am going to wrap up this video here. In the next video, we'll continue talking about other aspects of bar plots.